And I'm so honored to have two of these guests on. We have somebody who is a professor, and he's been on here many times, Professor Zenkus. I call him the professor, but he prefers to go by Anthony. So we have Anthony, who's from Columbia University. Isn't that where it started, everybody? Zenkus, I'm sorry. And we have a journalist. This is a diehard journalist, a real journalist, like in the true sense of the word, who has been out there on the ground at George Washington University. Get this, he hasn't slept. Do you understand? He hasn't slept, and he is still going to be joining us. So let me bring in both of these fantastic people who are from these sort of flashpoint university settings. We have Professor Anthony and we have Chuck Modi. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Great. How's it going? Nice to see you, Chuck.
Hey, great to see you, Doc. Again, you're at Columbia. I'm out here over in George Washington. Who knew we would have this setup? And I was going to try to get home, and I wasn't going to get home in time. And then I said, you know what? I got a better idea. So I'm right out here outside the barricades that were thrown down yesterday when the students said, let me quote, "Fuck these barricades." I think that was the exact quote. And I don't know if I got it exactly. It would have been "fuck these barricades, fuck these barricades, fuck the barricades." But I do want to say something before I go on. And CJ, I wouldn't do this to any show, but I know you're flexible, and I know
yes,
if it'll improve it on the fly. And I happen to have an incredible activist right next to me who is one of the DMV.
Yes.
Gallaudet University has been at these Free Palestine protests and didn't show up since October, but for years when we only had 25 people in the street. And you know what I do? I always try to amplify the people's voice who've been out here. So Yasmin, could you come in here and hold on? Let me see if I can get the camera right. Okay, there's Yasmin, and talk about badass protester. And what I wanted to say is when I do these interviews, and you compliment me a lot when I do these interviews, I learn from them tremendously. And the knowledge that is being spread on this campus right now is just ridiculous. And we'll talk a little bit more to your question, but thanks for having ahead of time. You'd be fine if I threw you a curveball.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go to her right now. If you had some questions or you had anything in particular you wanted her to speak to, we can do that right now. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. She's from Gallaudet University, one of the DMV schools, and you have to know this operation that is going on in George Washington University is supported by all of the DC universities. It's unprecedented. There's solidarity from all the universities. You find them here all together. So it's amazing. Students of Justice of Palestine helped organize that. She's also from Maryland to Palestine. Over the years, people don't hear of Maryland, Palestine the way they do Palestinian youth movement. But in here in DC, over the last few years, when there's 20 or 30 at a protest and almost no media around, is Maryland, Palestine out here and Palestinian youth movement and not much else. So I want to let you know, there have been people out here in DC for a long time. There's just no cameras around. So in many ways, it's such a beautiful thing to see that the rest of the world is catching up. But I'm gonna kick it. Should I kick it over to you, Yasmin? I mean, you could have any question you want, and you're gonna get an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean,
for me, I could just basically explain what's going on here.
No, that's what I was gonna say. I would rather just go ahead and speak. Tell us what you believe we should know and what's going on the ground and your analysis.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so today is the 5th day of our liberated zone of our encampment. Like Chuck said, it's a DMV SJP collaborated encampment on GW's campus. We've been here for 5 days. On the second day, the cops barricaded us, the students in here, with barricades going all around, restricted all entry for medics, for any resources that we need people-wise. We still got our physical items through, but they did not let any medics through. They actually only let the Zionist GW student paper journalists enter freely. They restricted our complete access to any bathrooms. We've been using bathrooms and trying to shower in tents, and we are fine with that because we're dedicated to the struggle. We're dedicated to doing this for Gaza, but it just shows that universities, that administration would rather suppress us and basically place a siege on their students rather than listen to what we're telling them, listen to what we're saying. And even it just shows you how evil the admin is and the president of this university is, Granberg. They ordered MPD to enter our encampment and basically get rid of us. And MPD, basically a very fascist organization, refused. And that's how you know how evil this university is, because even MPD is disagreeing with them. And so once they put up those barricades, community, which has been the only way that we've been able to sustain this encampment for 5 days. Communities set up tents out there on the street. So we basically had one huge encampment with only a barricade between us. But we know that all that is metal. And we see this encampment as one. And then last night, what happened was that the police, the GWPD, decided to escalate and decided to become violent with students and grabbed the student and tried to arrest him. And the community grabbed the student and de-arrested the
Yes.
student and chanted, "Let him go,"
De-arrested.
and pulled him back.
Love that.
And the cops gave in because they know that they're outnumbered. They know that we're winning. They know that they're scared of us. And so they let the student go. And then they made a big mistake because they infuriated all of the community members and students out there. And guess what they did? They rushed the barricades. They threw the barricades in the middle of here. They stood on top of them and they chanted. And they took back this liberated zone and opened it up to all of communities. So now we are one. Now the students are not isolated. And we are running the show. We are running the show.
That's
Yes.
absolutely. And let me just
That
say
was a
this.
nice drum
I
beat.
think
Yeah,
it's.
I know,
I think it's.
yeah.
Right on
I just
cue.
want to. Let me make this point. I just think it's extraordinary that a lot of the same tactics that Israel has been using in Gaza, this
Cut it out.
university is using on their students. Preventing access to medicine, preventing access to bathrooms. That's very IDF like. You get what I'm saying? It's very Zionist. Or I would compare it to the IDF is my basic point. But that was awesome. Chuck. I want to play a couple of the videos. And if you could just further kind of just whether she wants us to speak a little more, or whether you can, since you've been there. Why did you stay overnight? Why did you feel a sense to you said you felt like, man, I need to remain here, just in case something else would happen, or what was your reasoning for not leaving at all?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
I think
I'm
the
sorry. Go ahead.
connection's a little bad, but if I understood your question, why we're staying here, I think I got the gist.
Okay.
We understand, like as students, we understand that the only reasonable and the only actual response needs to also be escalation on our end. What we're witnessing is a disgusting, inhumane genocide. We're witnessing the most terrible forms of torture, the most unspeakable atrocities. How could we possibly continue to beg on our knees to university administration for them to listen to our demands when we have tried for ages to work with them? We know we're not stupid. We know that the only thing they listen to is disruption. The only thing they listen to is us threatening their economic gains. They only see us as tuition. They see us as walking tuition. And that's what threatens them when all the student body realizes that this university is an outpost of imperialism. It's not an actual university where we learn. And that's why we've made this encampment a popular university. And we're staying here because Gaza is seeing us and they finally feel a semblance of hope. They've literally spray painted the outside of their tents in Rafah and all over Gaza with "Thank you, SJP, thank you, students, thank you, GW." We've gotten personal spray paint, "Thank you, GW students." And that's the only reason we're here. We're not here for anyone else except for Gaza and except for all of Palestine. And so the the thing you mentioned about how this is basically a representation of kind of on a smaller scale of what they do in Gaza. Gaza has been under siege for 17 years, under a genuine siege. I mean, I know we're talking about not being able to get medics in and stuff, but we can still get resources through. Gaza has been unlivable since 2020. It has been deemed unlivable by human rights organizations. And so we made those connections. We had a press conference yesterday. We made those connections. There are students in here who are on their periods and cannot properly take care of themselves because of the university, not just because of the conditions are random. No, these are conditions imposed by the university. We know exactly who's doing this to us, and it's the same people who enable and continue the genocide and the occupation in Palestine. Um, the way that
What?
we've been restricted bathroom access, we've been restricted water, we've been restricted 1, 2, 3, 4 is a small scale representation about how about what they do in Gaza, what they do in Palestine, the psychological warfare that we can easily tell, the surveillance that is imposed on us by the cops. They walk around at night. They wake us up every few hours, threatening us with arrest. At least the first night. But now that they know we're not going anywhere and that we have a street full of community, they don't dare. They walk around and they record us on their cameras and they surveil us and whatever. They try to diminish our mental health or whatever with their barricades, but we are disciplined organizers and we are fighting a very principled struggle, and their scare tactics do not work on us.
Nope.
And what?
Nope.
Yeah,
That's how
and
you
what
free. That's how
they.
you de-arrest someone.
I love that word.
Yeah.
Could you also speak to what the broad sort of U.S. imperialist narrative that you guys are going to school not learning, you're being indoctrinated, and my analysis is the people who are protesting are the people who are the most knowledgeable on this, but they try to portray you guys as these foreign puppets that are
That's fine.
doing the bidding of
I didn't hear
somebody
that. Could you
else.
repeat
Yeah.
it one more time? The connection's not great.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But if you were
Let
talking
me
about
let me.
indoctrination,
Yeah,
we
well,
might have lost
just
them.
just.
I don't know
I'm
what's
sorry.
going
Did you lose
on.
me?
I mean, I'll say something from my
Yeah, go ahead.
specific perspective on indoctrination. Um,
Yes, go ahead.
My first Free Palestine protest was 2014. I imagine CJ's comeback. It was 2014, and the reason it wasn't many years earlier is because I was indoctrinated. My Jewish parents. I'm saying they lied to me. I'm saying they were lied to. I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I have so many Palestinian and Palestinian American friends now, but I'm almost embarrassed to say this around them. But it's like I only learned about Nakba a few years ago, right? And it's just like it embarrasses me, and yet I let myself off the hook because that's not my fault that nobody taught me, right? And it's not my fault that the media was so biased. And I learned that at a Free Palestine rally because I was told that in Israel we came on desert land and we spread love on this kibbutz and nobody lived there. I never knew we killed anybody. Nobody taught me that. So and when you're getting into Israel, we're talking about brainwashing at another level. Now I see we got thousands of anti-Zionist Jews in the streets protesting solidarity, and it's been beautiful to see in that regard. But when I interview Jewish anti-Zionist Jews, I almost always have a question, either on or off camera. And I ask them this. I say, unless they're under 30, you got some of these badass 20-year-olds, like, it's a new breed. But if they're over 30, I say, when was your awakening? I ask them when yours awakening. And then you have this wonderful story about when they learned they were lied to. And it takes a minute to realize people you love and you cherish were feeding you bullshit, whether they were lying to. And but at the end of the day, the truth is the truth. Genocide is a genocide. And on some level, this is also personal for me because it's like, I was raised on Holocaust movies. I really was. So when they said never again, yeah, never again. It's never again.
Okay, they were having connection issues. But we're happy that they survive as long as they could. I did see that. That's why I was watching I have my monitor here, so watching to see how delayed it was. Slightly delayed, so we saw that. But me watching it, I can see that at least you can hear them, but they're picture might have been delayed. So if they return, we will add them back in. But let's welcome in Professor Anthony. There goes Chuck again. But Anthony, could you speak to a little bit like what's happening? Let me wait. Let me make sure we get you ready, Chuck. Let me make sure the sound and everything. Okay, so it looks good. But Professor, could you just briefly speak to broadly what's happening on Columbia's campus too?
Yeah. So
Thank you.
as a lot of folks
You're
know,
awesome.
You need me?
As always. If you got to go do something, it's fine. But if you could stay here, then stay here.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Let me
A little bit longer.
go ahead.
yeah. So Columbia was the first school to do the encampment. They did it Wednesday, April 17th, which was the day that the president of Columbia, Minouche Shafik, was called to testify before Congress, before Lee Stefanik's committee. And so the students did this in secret. And early in the morning that day, they went onto the quad. So people need to understand what a quad is. If you didn't go to school or don't remember, it's an open area of grass, usually in 4 sections, or at least surrounded by 4 buildings, that does not impede any pedestrian traffic or interfere with any learning on campus. In fact, the zone that the students originally put their tents in is a zone set aside by Columbia for student protest and expression. So students said, great. Now think about this. We've been told, don't block traffic. You block traffic, people are late to work. It's not fair to them. So then the students said, okay, we'll camp out in the quad. They were told, don't do sit-ins in the lobbies of the buildings. Students have to walk around you to get to the elevator, to get to the stairs, to go to class. They said, okay, we'll put our tents in the quad. So the students put their tents in the quad, and the pro-genocide crowd wants to call out the National Guard because a bunch of students are sitting on the grass. They have lost their collective minds. They're out of solutions. They're out of arguments. They're out of answers. So the amazing thing is, I have photos of the first day of the encampment. I was on campus that day. I taught my class on Wednesdays. And it was, I don't want to say it was boring because being there wasn't, but the photo, it's just a bunch of tents and a bunch of students sitting on the lawn, milling around, talking to each other. It was completely benign until the university, under the direction of the president, decided it was a good idea to call in the NYPD. During the George Floyd protests, the NYPD was acted in violent, brutal, and racist ways, so much that they were fined millions of dollars. So you're now calling a racist, violent organization on campus to break up an encampment of students sitting on a lawn in a zone that you said was for free speech. So understand, they are not thinking with a full deck. And after that happened, the students jumped the fence and put their tents on the other side of the quad. It's a quad. How did you not know this would happen? And so what ended up happening is that galvanized. And all of a sudden, we see these things popping up everywhere. By the way, GW, amazing what you were doing. So the students are still there at Columbia. It keeps growing. They're doing teach-ins. They're feeding each other. Like, there's food, there's information, there's solidarity, there's songs, there's dancing, there's prayer. They are engaging in the daily Muslim prayer, those that are observant, and everybody is respectful of what people are involved in. They had the Passover Seder for a couple of nights for those students that are Jewish and others to join in. It's been a
You mean there's anti-Semitic students doing things for Jewish? What are you talking
I
about? What are you
don't
talking about,
understand.
Anthony? What are you talking about? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I know my Bible a little bit, interestingly, right? Because the Old Testament, that Abrahamic religions, the
My kind of
Christians,
professor.
Muslims, and Jews all come from that tradition. You know, what's the Passover Seder? The Jews were saying, "Let my people go." The Pharaoh said no, right? So the whole holiday was an anti-colonial holiday. Was the whole point of it. So yeah, so these people, they're calling these students anti-Semites. So Columbia SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, which has been banned from campus by the
They're banned
president
from campus.
and the administration. They banned them and Jewish Voices for Peace. SJP, you can follow them on Twitter, Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine. They came out with the statement, you know, basically, we respect all people. We do not give countenance to bigotry of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny, on and on and on. They've been very clear. And what happens at these protests, whether it's mostly off campus, you've got some fringe kooks out there who may or may not be plants. I don't know. But there's a few people saying some terrible things. And I'll say right off the bat, I don't agree with every single word in every single chant, because smart people sometimes disagree about the way we express things. But I can tell you, I've spoken to the students, I've spoken to the staff and faculty at this encampment. They are good people who are sacrificing potentially their university careers and their careers after it, because all of us at some level are sitting here watching an entire people be erased.
And let me and that is really, that's what's so the deafening silence about that, because that's what really the issue's about, that they don't, it's like they don't want to talk about that because they know the policy is not going to change. But Anthony, let me quickly just go to Chuck because he has to go, and ask him just to chime in any other items you, because I know the call dropped and everything. But it looks like you got a better connection. Let me take you off mute. One second. Let me take you off mute there so you can speak. But I know you have to leave, so any sort of parting words, and if our guest wants to also speak,
I want to kick it to Yasmin because she's being pulled on right now from other organizers. So before that happens, maybe your final reflections.
Ooh. I think students have always been the heart of every movement, of anti-war movements, of civil rights movements, of liberation movements. And I think people just need to take a step back and look at what they've praised in the past, what they look back and praise, and what they're doing right now and what stance they're taking right now. And understanding like that this construct, like you said about it's a yard, it's a schoolyard, this construct of like, this is against policy, this is against the law. What is the law? What is the law? Because if us setting up tents in an area of grass means that gives officers the right to brutalize us, then reassess. Keep your eyes on Gaza, keep your eyes on the West Bank. Settlers are absolutely abusing and assaulting Palestinians in the West Bank. Keep your eyes on all of Palestine, educate yourself, listen to students, listen to Palestinians, and free Palestine.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. I know you have to get going. Thank you so much. And Chuck, could you just, what we're seeing behind you, can you just describe what that is behind you? Physically, what's those What's that behind you?
Yeah.
You're standing in front of.
Okay. Well, behind me is behind me is the barricades, and you can see the barricades behind me. You can see the tents over here. There are tents over there. But also, I think yesterday, what is difficult to understand, I'm going to do my best to see if I could explain this with my camera. But up to yesterday, there was a fence, and there was a fence that was there to divide people inside, and the people who were inside, and Yasmin was speaking about it, could not go past that fence. And a lot of people don't understand this or know what happened. But there were 6 suspended students. And what we learned about those 6 suspended students is that they were inside the fence and they were told by, I'm walking like where the sidewalk is. So maybe you can see the sidewalk where I just walked by right now and going back. I would not have been able to do that yesterday at this time. Everything back here was closed off. It was almost like tear down that wall,
Mm-hmm.
when it was the barricades. Because when they trapped in these 6 students, they said you can use your ID to go inside the building and use the bathroom. That was the administration. And you know what they did? When they used that ID and their data was on the ID, those were the 6 that were arrested. In other words, they duped those 6 young people to have proof that they're in there, and they suspended those 6. I don't know if I said expelled. They suspended those 6. So yesterday, when the officer put their hands on that person and they de-arrested him, and people came in 200 deep, let them go and try to pull that person away successfully. When they said fuck the barricades, and when they pushed down the barricades and trampled it and all night stood on top of it and almost had a party on top of it, what was behind that is that you used those barricades purposefully and deviously to expel those 6 students. So those barricades were already a sham and already seen as a trap and a setup to harm the students. And very few people even know that story at all. But I want you to know the full depth of what fuck the barricades means.
Yeah, and I'm just playing the video that you put up that you sent me last night. I'm
Yeah.
playing that in the background. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, this is the barricade that you were just talking about,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is about the people
Love it.
in a broad concept. This is about the people. This is our country. The government and government entities and institutions don't tell us what to do. We tell them what to do. This
Yeah.
is our country. So that's what I look at as far as tearing down the barricade, because it's like, how dare you say that this is the dividing line between people who are in my community? That's absurd. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So, but any
Yeah.
sort of final words? Because I know you said you had about 30
Yeah,
minutes
yeah.
with us.
No,
Any sort of
I
final
have to.
words before we
I have to
let you go?
go. I just want to say it's really inspiring to see what happened in Colombia. I know Colombia has set off a lot of dominoes, and on some respect, you could argue that that is partially true here. But I have to say, having covered the George Floyd movement and all the protests, the organizing that went on informally to make this happen, because they did it in a very short time, whereas I think Columbia students were planning for a few months. They did in a very short time. The organizing and the relationships was already happening in previous movements. I know this covering George Floyd. I saw many of these relationships happen in students meeting people who were in the street movement. DC was notoriously segregated, the student movement in 9 universities, from many of the street movements. They're also segregated from each other. If I was invited to cover a protest, I may be invited by Howard or American or Georgetown, but never really cross collaboration. But with the Students of Justice of Palestine, they're able to really bring everyone together. And Students of Justice of Palestine have also been operating and organizing for years. So even though it came together quickly, the depth of the organization and the commitment, those relationships were informally building for a few years, which I believe makes this movement more sustainable.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And Anthony, I'll throw it to you if you had anything you wanted to ask Chuck before he has to leave, or any comments you wanted to make before I put him in the back.
Yeah, so what, Chuck? What is the mood of the students at GW right now, as far as how far are they willing to go? Also, are they is the administration negotiating with the students to meet their demands? And if they are those negotiations in good faith? Are they threatening to suspend all of those students? So, and what's the determination of the students as far as like, hey, no matter what happens, what are they going to do?
First of all, great questions. I could answer the second one very easily. The only person who really hasn't had any communication is President Ellen Granberg, okay? And there's none at all, and has been adversarial. And not the first time it's been adversarial. And when I mentioned that, this is not new, I have already covered a couple of GW protests in the past year. One which was against for the same reason, divest, and then one was a year ago before October 7th, divest. And so they were already doing this divest stuff with help of GW dissenters. They're a really great young group, the dissenters. And they were already doing this on a small scale, really proactively, trying to get their president divest, but no one was really paying attention to them. Now people are paying attention. And in all that time, she has chosen the millions of dollars that come with the weapons manufacturers, and it is very clear that is the case. She's not budging, and then has had some statements that have been flat out adversarial. So we don't see any movement whatsoever there. To your second question, on Thursday, the first day, I'm not new to it. I'm not a rookie to this. I've been at like hundreds and over 1,000 of protests, and never more did I feel like crying, like just crying, like out of my journalistic skin, sitting back with some of the old heads. You might know my friend Jackie Lugma. We're talking, and we're like, we love you kids. Like we've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you. You know what I mean? Yes, we're like proud. We're seeing people come together, but there was so much love there. And every organization that I've ever been around in DC was in the same place at the same time, the first time. It was a beautiful thing. And you saw how organized they were, but you saw how resilient. And I'm going to give you one example. All the 6 students who were expelled, they unequivocally have this same answer. I don't care. Fuck that. Expel me. We're going to free Palestine. You know? And I hadn't seen that level of, commitment. I don't know the economic background, but whether they're privileged or not, it doesn't matter. Most people aren't doing that, right? It means there's a commitment level that they know what they're seeing is a genocide. They know they're being lied to by their own government, and they're putting their schooling in perspective. Like, fuck this education. It's not even education. So I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen this resilience. Where it goes, I don't know. But what you'll hear a chant, and you heard it last night, we're not leaving, every night. So I don't know where this goes, but this is not a crowd that's going to go quietly.
And we're just here to feed that energy, because this, like
Yeah.
you said, this is the energy we want to see from young people. And I
Yeah.
can say, looking at the 3 of us in our gray hair, that we're kind of in the same boat when I say
Yeah.
young people's. Like, we can see this is the energy, and all we want to do, at you as a professor, you as a journalist, me as a podcaster and activist, we just want to feed this energy right here. But
Yeah.
Chuck, I know you got to take
I'm out.
off.
Yeah.
Get some sleep when you can, sir. You got to sleep. Everybody got to sleep.
I'm going to do that right
Take
now.
care of yourself so you can report. You got to take care of yourself so you can report.
I'm going to do that. Thanks for having me. And our guest, she's amazing. But we have so many amazing people out here. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. My education often comes from them. They say stuff. I hit Google. I go down a rabbit hole. I'm like, damn, it's more oppression than I thought. So I'm really I'm privileged to learn from some of the most amazing people. There's so much love in the air. What's going on in Colombia? What's going on here? What's going on around the country and around the world? We're in a moment. It's beautiful. Let's keep fighting. And thank you, CJ. Thank you, Doc. I really appreciate being here. And we'll talk soon.